Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 11th November 2016. The first article is related to the forgotten war. It is about Naxalism and how it got transformed into Maoism today, and what are the differences between the earlier movement and today's movement, how the Naxal ideology is going to destabilize our country, and finally, what shall be our strategy to fight the same. Is the law and order approach is alone sufficient to fight the Naxalism in this country? So in this context, let us see initially the Naxal movement in India was strongly ideological. It was spearheaded by the stalwarts such as Mazumdar, Pattabi Sitaramaya, etc. But today, the Naxalism has took a militarist movement where it is trying to destabilize the state and is in a state of mindless violence. And the second thing is, the ideological support for the Naxalism is also getting shifted. Previously, there was a large section of intelligentsia that has supported the Naxalism. But today, intelligentsia is not in very favor of Naxalism. And urban centers slowly losing the RLs are no more interested in support towards Naxalism. And colleges and universities were the breeding grounds for the ideological support. And that support is also waning as the new economic opportunities are coming forefront to the young population. But the support base is being shifted to rural areas and tribal belts. But if you see the location of the Naxalism in India, it is very much within the tribal heartland. And especially the central India is the major focus of action of the Naxal movement today. And it is very strategically important. And huge mineral wealth which is necessary for the industrial growth of the country is located over there. And the displacement movements which are coming up due to mineral exploitation by the multinational companies is becoming a breeding ground for the Naxal movement. Especially the Dalit movement is slowly taking the shape of the Naxal movement in certain caste-ridden states. If you take about UP and Bihar, the lower castes are the supporters of the Naxalism and upper castes have developed their own senas, which is leading to a kind of a class conflict over there. So it means that if the Naxalism has to be ended in the country, we have to see the socio-economic origins of the Naxalism. We shall not see it as merely a problem of law and order. There has to be a strong police action, there is no doubt about it. But police action alone cannot end the Naxal problem, as the problem is deeply rooted in the issues of socio-economic conditions in this country. And the next one is making climate rules at Marrakesh. So at Marrakesh, Morocco, we are having this COP session, conference of parties is going to come up. It is a step forward after the Paris climate change agreement. You know that the Paris Climate Change Agreement was ratified by different countries and it is already on force. Now, we have to bring in the core temperature of the earth below 2 degrees C, the rise in temperature below 2 degrees C on the pre-industrial levels. If it has to be achieved, all the commitments made by the nations at the Paris climate change, they themselves are not sufficient. It means much higher commitments are necessary. So these commitments have to come from the developing countries. So the developing countries has to balance the concerns of the development and at the same time the concerns of the climate change. So here, what are coming in between? One is the new efficient technologies need to be transferred to these countries. And added to that, the climate mitigation needs huge financial expenditure. So the financial transfers and technology transfers are critical in mitigation of the climate change. But however, with regard to financial transfers, in the Green Climate Fund, though $100 billion is been promised per year from 2020, there is no clear-cut transparency in that. Is that given by the private parties or is this given by the public agencies? It is not been clear. So financial transfers have to be made regular and there shall be transparency in the same. And with regard to technology transfers, yes, we have to ensure the technology transfers, but the major hindrance over here is intellectual property regimes. So unless these are being simplified to the benefit of the developing countries, achieving the goals becomes difficult. And the second one is, with regard to the Paris climate change, the carbon budget mechanisms are not put in place. Let us understand this. Let us take, with regard to the existing emissions, this entire carbon space has been over. So this particular space is the leftover space. So this blue color is the leftover space. So now, how this leftover space has to be divided? So will the developed countries take the responsibility for filling the globe with this much of emission? And more share will be given to the developing countries in this carbon budget leftover? So that is no such a discussion happened at the level of the Paris climate change talks. So that is the reason why, with regard to their historical emissions, the developed countries have to liberally give money towards the countries such as India for their developmental efforts. And India has to strongly do for the same. Now the next is India-UK relations. In this, let us understand certain points that India-UK relations, they are based on the strong democratic foundations and also the constitutional commitments of their respective countries. Why I am making this way? Now, India and UK are the two major heads of the Commonwealth nations. And Indian constitution is a continuation of the past. So, most of the institutions in India run as per the traditions in the UK. And the second thing is, the UK constitution and UK's immigration laws got recently tightened. And they were tightened none other than the Prime Minister Theresa May reign when she was the Home Secretary. So in this case, the major obstruction for the growth of India-UK cooperation is lack of free movement of the people. And the second thing is, India is the third largest investor in UK, and recently the UK's economy is getting slowed down and Indian companies are facing an erosion over there. Now if you see Tata's, they are trying to sell off their UK steel wing because of the low commodity prices and international erosion over there. So in this context, Theresa May appears to be not willing with regard to providing for increased or relaxable immigration so that our IT companies can get into UK. But however, the Brexit has provided for the new opportunity for these two countries to look into or to broaden their free trade agreement. But however, it can only be signed once the Brexit proposals ends. But however, the Brexit in UK is also going through a judicial quagmire and we have to ensure how it is going to be finally fulfilled. Let us start the discussion on reconciliation in the Sri Lanka. You know that a national unity government has come into existence and the Sri Lankan system is based on an executive presidency. And the third thing is, Sri Lanka also functions through a unitary model. Now, if the power sharing has to be effective, executive presidencies shall be given away for the parliamentary system and the new autonomous and constitutional institutions are to be created for checks and balances. Unitary system shall be given away for the federal system in Sri Lanka. Now, obviously, dilution of the power through federalism is opposed by the Sinhalese and resorting to the unitary system and continuing the same will be opposed by the Tamilians. So, a reconciliation mechanism is started by the President Sirisena and the Reconciliation Commission is also appointed. So, here we need to remember that creation of the divides is easy, but healing the wounds is very difficult. So, in this context, Sirisena's words that the reconciliation cannot happen over a night. It takes time. That's what is very apt. And added to that, the reconciliation shall not lead to the distance or else disaffection of the majority. Now, if more and more ground is conceded to the minorities, obviously it leads to disaffection from the majorities and this widens the so-called as divide rather than bringing the people together. a right mean, a golden mean has to be arranged or brought in the constitutional scheme. So obviously it needs to be a well thought out process. And added to that, human rights issues in Sri Lanka. During the Elam War, there were accusations that huge human rights violations have happened. So, UN Human Rights Commission has recommended for an international mechanism. But Sirisena clearly says that the constitutional perspective or scope do not allow for international intervention in this issue. And so, providing for a strong judicial mechanism and ensuring the judicial independence is the way forward with regard to the protection of the human rights and to restore the justice for the Tamilians who are the victims of this war. And further going on to the new color of money. Remember, the black money criminalizes the governance system in the country. So what does that mean? It increases the scope for corruption. And it also makes the democracy to the will of the money. The democracy shall run at the will of the people, but it converts it into the will of the money. So in these circumstances, curbing of the black money is essentially needed into this country, and there is no doubt about it. The doubt is only about the ways and means which are being provided for. Now the demonetization, yes, it definitely has certain advantages where the entire money has to move through the banking system now. But to what extent it will be sustained is the question. Because high denomination notes are being released again. So how the government can ensure that the future money will not become unaccounted again? So what it says is the black money arousal has to be timbered down or else has to be done away with at the source. So how shall we discourage it at the source? The major source of the black money is gold plus land prices. Now, every transaction of the gold and land, it has to be in checks or through the banking system, and the law has to be adjusted for that particular purpose. And the second thing is, the black money, it has got a self-generating mechanism. You all know that the capital is an important source for production. It is one of the means of production. So you have the black money, it will generate the black money further. So it means one single advantage is this self-perpetuation of the black money can be stalled for a while. And how it has to address the corruption in the governmental machinery, and these are the various questions which are still remaining and unanswered. And added to that, the Binami transactions and the money stocked in the foreign assets, how it has to be addressed, this is still a $1 million question. Now coming to the Haryana Punjab. So, if you observe, whenever the elections are around, the Sutlej-Yamuna link canal becomes controversial. The politics of the day raises these issues. If the constitutional mechanisms are the victims of the politics of the day, then the constitutional implementation respect for the judiciary gets undermined. So, the judiciary or Supreme Court is very clear on building the Sutlej-Yamuna link canal. And in 2004, the Punjab legislature has passed an act. It is annulment of river agreements. It is for annulment of all these agreements. So it is a unilateral decision. So by doing this in a way, it has tried to supersede the judgment given by the Supreme Court. My first fundamental question is, if the governments resort to the legislative mechanisms to supersede the Supreme Court judgments, how the balance can be struck between? How shall we arrive at the balance in this situation? Recently you have seen the Karnataka government did not agree for the Supreme Court's order. When the orders of the court are not being implemented, what are the ways before the Supreme Court? Only it can issue the contempt against the government, and government is not an individual. So how it has to be implemented? So these are the various questions that remain. So the matter is referred in the Sutlej-Yamuna Canal issue to the judiciary, that is Supreme Court, for its advisory jurisdiction under Article 143. So it means the Supreme Court has given an order that Sutlej-Yamuna link canal has to be completed by Punjab and the centre. So then it was annulled. The river agreement was annulled by the Punjab legislature. Then the law was being placed for the advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Then the Supreme Court in its advice to the government has clearly stated that yes, it is not constitutional. And the second thing is, in 2016, Satluj Yamuna Link Land Transfer Act is also been passed by the Punjab government. So it means whatever the land procured by the government for this particular canal will be returned back to the landowners. That's what is the essential feature of this act. It means it is trying to indirectly annul the implementation of building of this particular canal. So understand, the interstate river waters are expected to deepen if we do not protect our water resources. So effectively using the water resources is necessary. And the second thing is, the issues of federalism we need to understand. The states shall function in a federal spirit where there shall be an agreement on sharing. There shall be consensus orientation in their functioning rather than a friction or conflict orientation. So this very much threatens this consensus orientation, which is part of the better governance in this country. Now coming to the exclusive e-platform soon for the payment of government bills. Obviously, it is going to bring in demonetization, or money is going to be removed from the stream. So the second thing is, the 500 and 1000 rupees are going to come back. 150 rupees are also going to be placed soon. So these are the various things. And the most important in the news is the Prime Minister's visit to Japan. So here we need to understand nullification or termination clause. You know that Japan is very much sensitive for the nuclear issues because it is the only country which is a victim of the nuclear bomb. So Japan is also necessary for India to take forward its nuclear energy goals because all the nuclear reactor suppliers are Japanese companies. GE, Westinghouse, these are bought by the Japanese companies Mitsubishi and Hitachi now. Now, the second thing is, the Japan also supplies important spare parts across the world which are used in the nuclear reactors. So India-Japan civil nuclear agreement is critical for India's self-reliance on energy. But Japan wants a nullification clause as India is not a signatory of NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. So India is worried that if termination or nullification clause has been agreed on, tomorrow if situation demands, then this nullification clause is going to do away with its strategic advantage. So that's why how a common ground will be reached is a question over here. And coming to the live page, IIT team of Madras has developed a nanoscale replication of the materials. Now understand, it is not replacing here the silver with gold. It is just replacing a molecule by molecule over here. So, a nano replacement of the molecules will help in development of new alloys, so which can lead to better strength and resilience of the materials. So, these are the articles for today. Thank you very much.